Welcome to the 313 Men, Money, and Marriage podcast, the podcast where facts, logic, and reasoning are at the forefront of every conversation. I'm your host, Andrew Johnson, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the struggle economy, when the ends don't meet. And just to give the audience a little bit of heads up, we weren't able to record last week, but there was a few things that have popped up where we just didn't have an opportunity to do so. So we're going to be doing this episode here, and hopefully you'll get some information as well as entertainment as we go through with this particular episode. This is the money portion of the podcast. As you know, we talk about men, money, and marriage. And before I bring on the guests, I just want to go over a couple of statistics and why we're doing this. A lot of people are starting to feel the pinch of this new economy we're in, where it's not as easy as they thought it would be, and some of them are struggling. And one of the first stats that I do want to mention is that approximately 57% of our adult working class cannot afford a $1,000 repair on something if it broke down in their house without having to use the charge card. Speaking of charge cards, America, we are now at about $1.2 trillion in charge cards. Our credit card balances basically is at about 1.2 trillion is the credit that we're carrying. 21% have about $5,000 specifically in their savings account. $1,000 to $5,000 in their savings account is about 29% of all adults. And lastly, 42% of U.S. adults have an emergency savings that will cover 3 months. So that's about 42% of the population, or somewhere around in there, where they can do sort of cover their emergency savings for up to 3 months. So discussing a topic of this importance, I have to bring on my guest. First, I'm going to bring on a guy who's been back on the show multiple times. Actually, they both have been on multiple times, but this is the first time they've been on together. But the first guy I'm going to bring on is, everyone knows him here on the show, Mr. Greg's Take. Greg, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Just happy to be here.
Great. And the other guest, the last time I believe he came on, I don't know if it was when we were promoting your book or not. I think that might have been the last time he was on. But one of his episodes is in the top 10, and it was entitled, "Is There a Deficit of Economically Attractive Men?" That was the episode he came on too. He came on about, I think, 3 times. But give it up to the financial advisor for our show, Mr. Desmond Douglas. He represents Douglas Asset Development. How you doing,
Thank you. Oh, man, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Drew.
Great. Well, we're going to jump right into it.
With Greg today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the first time. Hopefully it won't be the last.
That's right.
All right. Let's jump in and get right to it. We're going to be talking about the job market. And I'm going to start with you, Desmond. The job market currently it's sort of been a mixed bag. And lately, there's been a mixed bag lately. So what are some things that you would tell someone who's sort of like, I guess, in between jobs, meaning that they might have been doing something, got laid off, and now they have to go find something else? What would you say to them?
I would say there's no shame in in having a bridge strategy, in between job. Some people may have used their side hustles at one point to supplement, the secured income that they have. And now maybe that's all you have left. I mean, there's no shame in that. Income is income, at the end of the day. I would also say utilize your network. A lot of times it's not about what you know, but who you know, right? So that's a great opportunity to be out networking. Definitely not a time to, you may have a moment where you feel down and discouraged, but at the end of the day, there is money out there. I will say that. And we just have to figure out how to make ourselves marketable.
Absolutely.
So getting out and talking, using your network.
Absolutely. Greg, same question. What would you tell someone that's sort of in that situation? And you've been there yourself before in the past. You mentioned before in the past when you left banking. What would be your suggestion you would give someone pertaining to that?
The environment that we're in right now, I would go old school and just say, don't quit a job until you've got another one with a guarantee in writing with salary. You're always more attractive when you've already got a job. It just makes them want you maybe a little bit more. If you've got that extra little spice that they're looking for, there's got to be something about you in that interview that sets you apart as much as humanly possible from the other people that are coming through the door and being interviewed. Because in my experience. Most people just don't really know how to interview very well. They just don't really put too much effort into it. And I think really one of the reasons for that is maybe they're younger and they're inexperienced. But I think, and I've done this before, we get a little lazy. We rest on our laurels when money's been cheap for 15 or 20 years and it's been kind of easy to get hired. Those days are over, baby. So just sharpening our skills, our interview skills. And Desmond said an excellent point. I'm not real big on networking with people and going to my network. When I have to, I do, but that luxury is going to be, it's fading. So yeah, times are definitely changing. And I would say lean on the wisdom of people that are older than you and more experienced than you, no matter how much you think they don't know. That can be a grave mistake in this environment.
Absolutely. And I just want to make the disclaimer that we are not, this information that we're giving out is for informational purposes only. And we recommend that you do your own research and do some research and figure out, what would be the next best move for you to make in sort of tough economic times. I guess the next area I want to get into, Greg, and I'll start with you, is what does it feel like when those ends don't meet? When you, as they say, you have more month than money, what does that feel like? Like what is it's gotta be very difficult just to be a little bit transparent. Several years back, I was sort of in that situation. Now I had money in savings to carry me over, but check wise, at one point, I was coming up a little short, and it was just because I had an unexpected bill that came up that I didn't calculate into my expenses, and then so I had to, use savings in order to get through that difficult situation. But some people don't even have that, as you know. As I said, 57% don't even have enough to do $1,000 repair in a house. So my question to you, Greg, is what does it feel like when those ends don't meet? What can you think they're going through at that point?
Pit in your stomach, man. I mean, there is nothing like knowing that if you don't make it happen, the rent doesn't get paid and the food doesn't get put on the table and the mortgage payment doesn't get made and the lights don't get turned on or stay on. There's no feeling like that. It's something that when we experience it in our younger years or maybe even in our later years, things happen to good people. Nothing pushes us more to be as creative as humanly possible, to be as open-minded as humanly possible, and also have an opportunity to be humble as humanly possible and maybe take a second job or a third, which I don't wish on anybody, but sometimes it's necessary in an area that you may have said, I would never work in that area. It just depends on how much of a corner you have been painted into by the situation and, what it is that you're willing to say, I have to eat some crow here and make a decision. Sometimes the bills get behind. We let go what isn't collateralized. Credit card debt's one of those things. I'm not saying do that, but when push literally comes to shove, do I eat or do I pay the Visa? That's an easy choice to me. I've never been there before, but I've been with literally no money left over after payday with no credit cards, but it was only because I just didn't have enough of a credit history to get it. But I know what it feels like to get up and go, if I don't go to work, I'm not going to be able to make my rent in a week. That's not a good, I've actually been asked to leave in a trailer that I rented. The landlord just didn't like me and he didn't like the fact that I was dating somebody that was a couple of years younger than me. He was very religious. That just happened to be how he lived his life. And, we played a little bit of music one night and played some cards. There wasn't any crazy drinking or anything like that going on. And he asked me to leave. And I had 2 weeks. I got kicked out. So, yeah, I know what that feels like. It sucks.
Absolutely. Des, same question pertaining to that. I mean, you're dealing with clients and, and people making investments and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I don't know how common this is for you to have to see or deal with, but how do you think that person feels when they're going through that?
Yeah, suffocating, I would say, is the one word that jumps to mind. It does happen even in my industry, even with clients who may have, as a financial advisor, I work with people on their retirement accounts, right? They'll have IRAs and brokerage accounts. And, one of the first things that we go over is budgeting. And so I would say in this situation, that is as sobering as it will be to go back to that budget and to reevaluate it because most of the time we underestimate our budgets. But when we could actually see what comes in and goes out, and obviously in this situation, there would be less coming in hopefully not all stops from coming in, because that's when you have to resort to maybe that side hustle needs to become their primary source of income. But either way, when that income starts to get short, we have to really now it comes time to break it down to the necessities. And so, again, as sobering as that might be, the reality is these are what must be paid. And then that's when we have to start being, creative and for lack of a better term, to rob Peter to pay Paul, and using those credit cards when that's not ideal. But hey, it's the difference between you being able to sleep at night. Sometimes it does boil down to that. And I have seen clients in those situations. Fortunately, for some people that I deal with, they'll have a backup in their brokerage or their retirement account, which is not the first place that you should be tapping into, for sure, because of the taxes and potential penalties. But that's why an emergency fund is really, really important, and so hopefully during these times, maybe the person that's going through it today is going to be in more of a bind. But hopefully, if we're preparing for the future and now being mindful, maybe this thing that we're going through today can be a wake up sign, a wake up call to say, hey, you know what? At the very least, I need that 3 to 6 months of expenses, and that emergency fund becomes vital, because that's exactly what it's for. It's for moments like these. And that 3 to 6 months typically is for necessities. It doesn't necessarily include, it depends. Everyone measures it a different way. But 3 months of necessities is usually the, rule for a emergency fund. 6 months if you're single,
Yeah,
3 if you have
absolutely.
2 incomes. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. It's funny you're saying that, because I've had several people, and I'm bringing this up just because you're a financial advisor, that while they're in the accumulation phase at work and they're contributing to their 401ks, I've had so many people borrow from their 401ks, and when they get into a little bit of a jam, or they need a little bit extra here and there, and I always put my hands up with the stop signal and say, please don't do that, because they always come back with me, well, I'm just borrowing the money from myself. And I try to explain to them that's not necessarily true. What would you say, Des, to someone who is doing that, where there may be other ways? Because the way I look at it is that when you're coming up short, you got two options. You can cut down on your spending, or you're going to have to bring in more revenue from somewhere. That might be a temporary second job, something. But those are your two options that's immediate. But what would you say to a person that wants to tap into that 401k plan while they're still in the accumulation stage at work?
Yeah, ouch. I mean, look, there are legitimate hardship withdrawals, right? And that's when you'll have the option for most people to tap into it, and you would be paying back interest, but it is from an account that you own. Still, I mean, I would say ideally that should not be your first resort, or second. Honestly, it should be, how do I decrease my expenses, right? My outflow. How do I add more income? Do I take on an extra job for a season? Just, do I have an emergency fund? I mean, though there are a few things that really need to go in order. And a lot of us are guilty of it, when you really think about it, listening to those stats. I would say it's surprising, but I'm familiar with them, but it's still just like, it stings when you hear it, because that's how we're living. And I think it's not necessarily because we don't have the income. It's probably more that we mismanage. And I have the same circumstances with high income earners, high net worth people. My doctors and my lawyers, they make large amounts of income, but they are hyper consumers. And so their income is dependent upon their ability to go to work. And God forbid they have to take off for a month. That could be a problem. So it happens across the board, low income, high income, and it's really the responsibility, how we manage our personal finances tells the picture. A budget could be one ground zero way of looking at everything. We have to take inventory of what we have. We have to see where it's coming in and where it's going out. Most people don't know that. I think
Yes,
that would be a
absolutely.
good first start to see what's coming in and where is it actually going. And you'd be surprised how much you could be saving, putting away into these retirement accounts, which is a whole nother conversation, and even preparing for these seasons when things are shaky and we have to hold tight to the budget, but make sure we get through the next 3 to 6 months because it will pass, right? The economy
Yes,
moves in cycles. It's just what do we do to weather that storm? And a lot of people are playing it too close.
absolutely. Absolutely. Greg, I want to ask you this. If you are struggling financially, should you, and you having sort of financial shortcomings, should you keep it to yourself or talk to someone about it? We're very guarded. We're a very guarded society pertaining to our finances. We don't like to let nobody know what our financial situation is. We're very guarded about it. I've mentioned it to you on the show before that we will talk to a stranger and in 20 minutes tell them about our sex life. But if they were to ask us about our finances, we would be offended and get very defensive. So, Greg, what would you do? Should you talk to someone about your financial shortcomings or keep it to yourself?
Human pride is a very interesting thing, gentlemen, and it can actually kill people. And for some people, it's just built into their brain. It's wired in there. Did they inherit it? I'm no scientist. I don't know. Did they learn it from their parents? Maybe. Did they practice it down through the years and say, I'm not going to ask for help until my arm is literally hanging by one tiny thread of meat before I go and ask somebody to take me to the hospital. I mean, I've known people like that, and it's hard to shake somebody off of that. And the only thing I can say is how bad does it have to get before I say I need help, and just be humble about it. It's either that or continue to do what you're doing and just tempt fate. Like Desmond said, we're cutting it too close. And right now, in the last 15 to 20 years, money's been cheaper than it's ever been in human history in banking. If you're not making it in that environment and you're living check to check, I'm not here to say anything about how that came to be. But if you're intentionally cutting it close, knowing you could do more to have the buffer that Desmond talked about, all I'm saying is you're throwing the dice every single time you get up and do that. And when it hits you, it's going to be like a brick wall, and then you're going to be in emergency mode, and then your options start to run out. Options are one of the most beautiful things to have, no matter how small they may appear. One option is better than none, and one that's kind of crappy, a job that maybe you're not crazy about, that's better than no job. So it really depends. The answer is it depends on the person, how stubborn they are, and how much pride they have.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. The pride is what gets us pertaining to this. We feel, so guarded about that. And you made a good point when you said that. So
I think men more so than women. I didn't mean to
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. There's
That's
this question. Yes. This is for you. And I want to ask you, just tell me what you think about this. When the ends don't meet, what is harder? Is it the mental stress or the math / arithmetic? Which one, when the ends aren't meeting, which one is like, what's the hardest one of the two?
When the math ain't mathing, right?
Yes.
Definitely the mental part. I would say from my perspective. Why? Because the math is black and white. I mean, it's pretty simple. Is it easy? No, but it's simple to understand. But it may not be easy to navigate around. One thing, and I really appreciate what Greg just shared. And one area too, just to piggyback on what he said from the last question, is maybe we haven't necessarily spoken about spouses yet, right? And maybe that's so. That silence, how should I say, silence breeds shame, right? And not often do we talk about, especially guys. I know that's the statistic. I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty certain that it is. But also being able to speak to even a spouse, right? Because even that financial infidelity, that happens, right? And we have things going on behind the scenes, even in our marriages. And it's about men, money, and marriage, right? So tapping into that spouse, having that meeting, that family meeting, just to say, hey, look, this is where we are, budget in hand, right? We're not just talking about, frivolous money. We're talking about the dollars and cents and what helps the operation of our household to flow. and having a real, hopefully both of you not out of work, and even though it may be tight, even though, it may be a pinch in the grocery store, inflation has been coming down. So, but still, it's hard to explain that to some people who still feel it. But having that real conversation with your spouse is definitely helpful, necessary. You'd be surprised what two people can do when they put their minds to it. There's been a season where I've had to kind of grind and struggle and kind of make my way through make my way through while my wife was able to hold it down, in some regard. Even sometimes children, childcare, that could be super expensive. Sometimes there's sacrifices that one can make to save a little bit by staying with the children while the other one goes out to work. There's no one better than the other, right? We're partners. And so there are times when those types of executive decisions need to be made in the household. There's no pride in the guy having to make more. There's no pride in the guy not wanting to talk about his financial shortcomings. It's an opportunity to grow stronger, to be transparent, to be vulnerable, to talk to someone, include a financial professional. That's definitely a wise decision. Everyone that comes into my office is not a potential client or an ideal client, but I never just turn someone away. If there's someone going, and plenty of people have come in with just hardships. They're not even talking about being in the black and investing and preparing for a future. They're like, how do we get out of this debt? We have credit cards. We talk about avalanche strategies, snowball strategies, and Dave Ramsey programs and all of this kind of stuff. And at the heart of it, I understand that that's where a lot of people are, Americans are. And so we have to have some real conversations. So I absolutely feel like the mental part of it is the toughest part. Because once we could get our mental straight, and this is a whole different conversation as well, but once we could get our mind in the right place, ready to receive, things happen, good things happen. It doesn't have to be a hardship for you just because the economy, but if you subscribe to the news channels all day and that's all that's being poured in, yeah, that's probably all that's going to come out, and you'll think that the weight of the world's on your shoulders and you're suffocating financially because they said the economy's down. But, meanwhile, there are people that prosper during these times. Every moment is not a mountaintop moment. We are all going to go through the valleys, but we can still remain positive. How we respond to it has to say a lot. And then having to sacrifice, eating crow, just like, sometimes, like Greg said, sometimes we have to take on the jobs that aren't so desirable so we can have that money coming in, because when you are working, when you do have that income, good things happen.
Absolutely. Greg, I want to ask you this here. What are some strategies that you can use to make things sort of stretch? When you're in these tight situations, how do you make those ends stretch a little bit further than they normally would, per se, if you were doing well?
One thing that I find myself kind of doing out of habit, we're not talking spending tons of money, but just like a reflex, I need something, a tool or whatever. And like, literally the hardware store is 15 minutes from my house. And then another 10 minutes down the street, there's another one, and they're big ones. Look at what you already have. Like, go into your tool shed, go into your garage, go into your closet and go, what have I already got that I can accomplish whatever this task is? That would be, one thing you can do instead, and especially being able to order stuff online and get it shipped the next day. Amazon Prime is a pretty cool thing, but man, can it do some damage. I mean, it may as well just be QVC shopping at 2 a.m. We can get in trouble there, but just look at what we have and say, can I, unless it's a truly like a specialty tool, maybe to fix your car in a certain way and it's not ridiculously expensive. There's exceptions, but look at what you already have. Try to get out of the habit of, I'll just go buy it, especially a tool that we call a one and done, a specific tool that you're only going to use maybe once in 5 years. Try to rent it maybe. Talk to your neighbor. Do you have this tool? Learn how to barter, right? Trade with your neighbors. And by the way, if you're living next to people for 15 to 20 to 25 years, and it's easy to do, and you don't know them by first name, that's going to change very quickly. We're going through some pretty interesting times, but Desmond made a good point. It doesn't all have to be doom and gloom, but I mean, I walk my dog more than anybody on my block, and I walk just for me probably more than anybody on my block. It's not look at me, look at me. People now see me on a continuous basis. I have brief conversations with them. That builds trust in people's minds. They're like, oh, that's that guy that we always see. It's just the repetition of them having a tiny conversation with you. So when you need help, if you reach out, they're not going to be fearful of you or not really know who you are. So I don't know if I trailed off on that one or not, but your neighbors are a resource in a good way. You can be one to them and they can be one to you. So take a look at what you got on the shelf before you go out and buy something. That's one trick.
Got it. As I want to ask you this question here, is it important to celebrate small wins when you're in this journey, when you sort of in that difficult situation? How do you maybe go about celebrating some of these small wins? Like, like just to say, hey, I paid this one credit card off that was charging me 25% interest or something, and now I don't have that. How do you go about that? Do you think that's important to celebrate those small wins?
Oh man, that is so huge. You'd be surprised what that can do to your mental state just by first you have to write it down. You have to have goals. If you don't take score, then forget it. How do you know if you win? Right? How do you know if there is a victory? And so I would say for sure that is that $1,000 emergency fund, the Dave Ramsey way, right? Those are small wins, being able to accumulate that, paying off a bill, using that debt snowball, and now being able to take the payment from that one that was paid off, adding it to the second one, and now we're attacking the next one. That builds momentum. It's a marathon. This didn't happen overnight in most cases, right? And so it takes time to recover from it. And so those small victories can make a huge difference. So absolutely want to
Absolutely.
celebrate those and celebrate them with your spouse. Celebrate them with the family. There are lessons that your kids can learn from this. There were plenty of days where we had to just eat spaghetti, right? There's those days. So being able to condense it, looking at your budget like, hey, we spend a lot of money eating out. That needs to come down now. We need to go to bare necessities. We're in this survival mode, cutting down on subscriptions, things like that can help, meal prepping or you were just talking about the Amazon. Man, Amazon is so convenient, but that could be dangerous, right? For credit cards and for people who are just used to spending. We have emotional triggers that cause some of us to shop, right? And so being able to freeze those credit cards or cut them. I'll tell clients to cut a credit card quickly. You don't have to close it, but cut it. If it's that much of an emergency, you're gonna have to order a new one. Put it in the freezer in some cold water, and you have to chisel it open. That might make you feel kind of strange, like, oh my God, I feel like such an addict right now. Do I have to chisel my credit card out the freezer? Things like that to slow you down. But when you are able to see positive results, it definitely feeds back into the psyche, it feeds back into the mind, and then you hopefully are better because of it, and you can build on that momentum.
Absolutely. I think once you get, you make a small victory when you did something like pay off a credit card, a high interest credit card, when you feel better and your confidence goes up, you feel like you've accomplished something. So you're more likely to do the next step and the next level. Greg, I want to ask you, we're going to close out with this last question to you. What does financial peace look like? Or maybe what does it mean to you? I just always thought it meant stability, but I don't know. My stability might be different than both of yours, but that's the way I look at it. But what are your thoughts on financial peace? What does it look like to you?
Well, I will unashamedly tell you one example you're looking at right now. Right. And I'm not, that's not bragging. It's just a fact. To me, one way of looking at it is this would really be more, I'm trying to think of the term. I was talking to my wife about this earlier today, or my brother actually. One huge part of financial peace for me is I can get up tomorrow morning, I can pay all of my bills and have way more than left over than needed, and I don't have to go to work anymore. Now, I'm in my late 50s. People listening can be in different age groups, so it varies. But you don't necessarily have to be in that particular spot. It can be, Desmond mentioned something extremely powerful. When you're in your, let's say you're in your mid 20s, having $1,000 in the bank that you know is there when you really, really need it, I'm telling you, you sleep better. You know, a hot water heater, I replaced mine a couple of years ago. I stay fairly well in touch with prices, I think. And I was guessing it's going to be about $1,000. I was right. Now, there was a time when you could get a nice new hot water heater for $600 or $700. Those days are gone. So it doesn't take much. But I think that the thing of how much time do I spend thinking about money problems? And this gets back to the part about, do we talk to people? Because most of us keep it inside. It's a source of shame. It can be a source of guilt. It can be a lot of things. And this is a deeper, conversation. But my wife is older than I. She was born in 51. I was born in 69. When she was growing up, if you had a second mortgage, you told no one. It was a source of shame in the community to have to take out a second mortgage on your house to get out of trouble. So it's different for everybody. Even if you're 3 months ahead on your bills, that's financial peace, people. It isn't total debt. It doesn't mean total debt elimination. Dave Ramsey teaches pay everything off except the mortgage if that's what you want to do. That's massive financial peace. And I've used his ideas down through the years and taught similar ones to that. The math is the same. I've seen doctors that made strong six-figure income, as Desmond mentioned, that were dead broke. And if they didn't go to work, it didn't matter that they were cutting people's chests open and repairing the arteries. Their bills weren't going to get paid. And that's no way to live. It's no way to live.
Absolutely. That one accident or injury away to, when you're living like that, to financial ruin. If a surgeon can't use his hands, I mean,
that's right.
That's it. Game's over.
One bad finger injury that can't be repaired fully, loss of motor control in one finger. I know they insure their hands. I know they do. Surgeons insure their hands for sure, but still.
It's just a risk. All right. Well, we're about to wrap up, and I want to thank my two guests, Desmond Douglas and Mr. Greg, Greg's Take to come on. And if you have not done so already, we do have a website. The link is always in the show note. You click on that website, you can join our email list. All you have to do is put your first name and email address. If you want to see clips of the show, if you don't have Spotify and don't watch it, or our YouTube channel, sometimes we'll put a full-length episode up there, but most of the time we just put clips. But if you want to see other clips and you have Instagram, it is the 313 Men Money Marriage, all one word, where we have clips of previous shows. We'll have clips of this show that will be on the Instagram page as well. The YouTube channel is called the Men Money and Marriage Hour. You can go there and see longer clips of the Pacific podcast episodes, as well as some short ones that are in YouTube Shorts. So with that being said, until we meet again, we are out.